Hello, welcome everyone. Really excited that you're here. You're here for the Transfer Application Workshop for Community College students. We have lots of folks in the waiting room, so we're just going to give it a minute and let everyone join the room. Just thank you for your patience. Welcome to those of you who just joined us. We see the numbers continuing to rise, so we're going to give it another 30 seconds here and make sure all those folks in the waiting room are in the virtual room. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, I think it's leveling off. And I'm really happy to see that. So many hundreds of folks in the room, which is terrific. Thank you everyone for joining us. Just so that you know, you are here in the Transfer Application Workshop for Community College students with Amherst, Pomona, Princeton, Williams, and Yale. My name is Adam Sapp. I'm the Director of Admission at Pomona College, and I'm thrilled to be with you tonight. I'm joined by fantastic colleagues here who I'm just going to allow them briefly just to introduce themselves. You'll hear from everyone this evening a little bit more in depth, but for now, how about just name an institution? Let's start with Lexi at Amherst.
Good evening, everyone. At least it's evening where I am here on the East Coast. I'm very excited to be here. My full name's Alexandra Hurd. I go by Lexi. I use she, her pronouns. I am an associate dean at Amherst College in Massachusetts, and I'm joined here also with my colleague Kira Byrne, who will be dropping some links in the chat throughout the evening. So very excited to get to speak with you all.
Hi, everyone. We'll skip Adam since he already introduced himself. My name is Alex Buston, representing Princeton University, where I am Senior Associate Dean of Admission and also Director of Transfer and Military and Veteran Admission as well. We will shortly be joined by our colleague from Williams College, who's running a bit late due to some technical issues. So just a quick note, Alex Diadezio from Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, will be joining us soon. She is a Senior Assistant Dean of Admission and also manages their transfer and veteran admission as well. And I'm sure we'll be very excited to join us as soon as she can get past technical issues.
And welcome, everybody. My name's Patricia Way. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions at Yale. I also work with transfer students, and I'm also Director of Admissions for our Eli Whitney Students Program, which is our program for adult students. And joining me today is my colleague, Becky Tynan, who's going to help with answering some of the questions in our Q&A box.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Patricia, that's a great reminder. I do have a couple of housekeeping tips tonight. As you join us for tonight's program, just remember that there are captions available. If you would like to use the captions, please use the button at the bottom of your screen on Zoom in order to access captions. We are going to be engaging in some Q&A and conversation at the end. We'd prefer not to use the chat. It's just difficult to keep up with. So to ensure that we get to your question and we can see everyone's questions, please use the Q&A box. We know many of you did submit questions when you registered, and our colleague Alex Buston from Princeton has collected all of those and sifted through them, and will be leading us through Q&A at the end. And of course, tonight's session is scheduled to end at 8:15 Eastern. So we hope to take about an hour and 10 or an hour and 15 minutes of your time. And we will be efficient with that use of time as we move through tonight's presentation. So thank you all very much. I do want to move to the next slide just so that we can detail a little bit more about tonight's agenda. We have a very full agenda and we have a lot to talk about. For many of you, this may not be the first time that you've joined us online, and we've designed a series of virtual workshops this year each one is a little different. So we do hope that you'll have some different key takeaways from tonight's session. And so we just want to outline that very quickly. We're going to talk a little bit about the liberal arts and its relationship to the admissions process. Of course, the bulk of the conversation will deal with the application process, which includes things like the essay and letter of recommendations, as well as information on transfer and on financial aid. Lots of good questions about credit and credit evaluation. And then we'll end with some tips as well as some specific information on our institutions as we move into Q&A. All right, so if that looks good, we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. As we move through this, one of the things we hope you'll do is keep your questions and fill the Q&A box. We have staff in the background who are interested in answering your questions and making sure you leave highly informed, but we want to kick off with just a very clear explanation of how we connect the liberal arts philosophy that each one of us has at our institutions to our evaluation. And we've summarized this in a series of what we call "we believe" statements. So this is really an articulation of the things that we believe in as institutions and that we actually look for, think about, and talk about in our application process. And so I'm just going to move through these just to very clearly connect them because we think this is important. The first is that we believe in interdisciplinary learning. And we hope that you're seeing connections in the world. We know that knowledge is connected, that ideas are connected, that you need to know a lot about a lot in order to see solutions that no one else has seen. And at our institutions, you're going to find students and professors eager to solve problems that are not currently solved. And in order to do that, you have to make connections between different disciplines. So how does biology connect with mathematics? How does sociology connect with history? We are institutions that believe in the power and connection of knowledge, and we're going to talk about that as we think about it from an evaluation point of view, how that comes out. We believe in the power of diversity. We believe that diverse voices and people with different lived experiences make our educational institutions better. We believe that diverse communities have educational benefits and that we all can learn from ourselves as well as from our peers as we think about the classroom and as we think about our residential communities. We are also going to talk a little bit about residential learning and how life outside the classroom impacts our institutions. And we're going to look at that in the application as well. We also really believe in learning beyond the major. And this should come as no surprise. Whether you major in economics or computer science, whether you major in history or religious studies, whether you major in French or in physics, you need to know more than just the information in those one content areas, in those one disciplines. Thinking beyond the major, learning beyond the major is key to success at all of our institutions. And we would argue it's key to success after you leave our institutions as well, that learning beyond the major is fundamental to succeeding at all 5 of our colleges and universities. We also want to put in a plug for small classes. We know many of you, and we hear this from so many students at community colleges who are seeking to transfer, that they're looking for institutions that allow you to have relationships with your peers and relationships with your professors. And we all think that that happens best in small academic settings. So average class sizes of 8 or 9 or 10 or 13, really small classes, very intimate learning environments. They allow you to really understand how you learn. And we want you to tell us how you learn and reflect on learning style, because we know there's lots of ways to learn material. but we are thinking about you as a learner and how you learn best. And as we think about our institutions and what we call your fit for our institutions, something like small classes is one example of many in terms of how we operate and we do such great work. And finally, it goes without saying, but you know what? We're going to say it. Transfer students add value. We believe that perspectives of students who are transferring in different life experiences, whether you have a military or military affiliated background, whether you're a student who has made their way through a community college and maybe you've taken a little longer than you initially thought, but you're doing really well and you want that bachelor's degree, or maybe you're a student who entered a community college experience right out of high school and you'd always plan to transfer in as a sophomore or a junior. All of that is terrific, and we welcome those experiences. Not everyone on our campuses comes to us directly from high school, and we think that's great. We really believe that community colleges offer students a place to do deep learning and also a way to enter our institutions that's as valid and as excellent as other ways. In the next slide, as we move through here with some of our introductions, we are going to have multiple speakers tonight. And so we have 2 slides here that provide just a brief overview of Amherst, Pomona, Princeton, Williams, and Yale. And you can see some of the highlights here that we've decided to elevate for you. This is just a reminder slide. We have a detailed PDF that our colleague is going to send out and will share over at some point in the meeting, I think very soon, and you'll be able to see that PDF so that you can have the details. That PDF contains a deep dive of all of our institutions, one institution per slide, and will allow you to really take stock of the differences as well as the many similarities between Amherst, Pomona, Princeton, Williams, and Yale. In the next slide, as we finish up the 5 institutions, you'll see the slides on Williams and Yale. I'm not going to read the slides for you. You can read them, but the detailed deck of that you're about to receive or may have just received is available for you there. So thank you so much for hanging in there for our introductions and for our overview. I now want to move us into the next portion of our presentation, information on the application review process. And for that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Lexi from Amherst College.
Hi there. Actually, Patricia, is this you?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
It is.
Jump right in.
Sorry, that's all right. So thank you to all of you for joining us today. My colleagues will spend time later in this session discussing the details of writing the essays, requesting letters of recommendation, transfer of credit, and applying for financial aid. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I'd like to share what our admissions committees are looking for when we review applications. I know some of those questions have been in the Q&A box, have been posted in the Q&A box. And having an understanding of our evaluation process may help you as you prepare your application and help you before you hit the application submit button. It may be that I'm just a bit nerdy, but the favorite part of my job is reviewing applications. I love reading your essays, learning about your background and life experiences, seeing what classes you've taken, and learning about you from your recommenders. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about our whole person review process. So if you attended one of our previous joint sessions, oh, hold on one second. I think there we go. I don't know, for whatever reason, I was not on camera. So sorry about that. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about our whole person or holistic review process. And if you attended one of our previous joint admission sessions, you may remember that I said that we take many factors into consideration when making admissions decisions. I can't give you an easy answer about your likelihood of admission, but because we do not base our admissions decisions solely on quantitative measures like GPAs or test scores. Of course, your past academic performance is important, but it's not the only factor that we take into consideration. None of our 5 colleges use a formula to make admissions decisions, but that does not mean that we make admissions decisions haphazardly by pulling names out of a hat. We certainly put a lot of thought into each application. We know that you're going to spend a lot of time preparing your application, so we too will put a lot of time reviewing your application. But maybe the best way to illustrate our whole person or holistic review process is really to provide you with some examples. So let me provide you with 2 examples of successful applicants. Meredith, and that's not her real name, she did not have the strongest high school transcript. Her grades ranged in high school from A's to D's. Her family circumstances in high school were rather difficult, and she was bullied in school, so her high school years were a struggle. After graduation, she enrolled at a local community college to pursue an associate's degree, where she took a number of classes, including history, biology, English composition, math, psychology. Meredith ended up getting grades all in the A range in her college courses. She really turned her academic life around. She held student leadership positions at her community college and led many initiatives to make her college more community-oriented. Her letters of recommendation from her college instructors confirmed her contributions to the community college and to the classroom. Her application essays were well written and revealed to the admissions committee that she would contribute a different perspective to our campus and work to make Yale a better place. And we were happy to admit Meredith as a transfer student to Yale. The second example is Jeff, again, not his real name, graduated with about a B+ average from a very small high school. He joined the Army immediately upon graduation. He reached the rank of sergeant and was honorably discharged after a 5-year stint in the military. He then worked in the private sector for 2 years. He took courses part-time at local community colleges, both while he was on active duty and while he worked full-time. His courses included math, composition, and chemistry, and he received college grades mostly in the A range. 2 out of his 3 recommendation letters came from his community college instructors, and the 3rd recommendation was from the military. Unlike Meredith, Jeff was not on track to receive his associate's degree. He was just taking classes sort of part-time here and there. Nonetheless, his joy for learning really came through his essays and letters of recommendation. He's now thriving at Yale in our Eli Whitney Students Program for adult students. He's actively engaging the Yale community, and his study abroad has been fully funded by Yale. And I hope that these 2 examples reveal that we seek students who will not only succeed academically at our colleges, but who will also contribute in other ways to our campuses. Though the examples I provided are of Yale students, I mean, both of these cases are representative of students at all 5 of our institutions. And you may have noticed that I have not mentioned anything about standardized testing, and I know that there was a couple of questions about that already in the Q&A box. All 5 of our colleges are currently test optional. If you submit your test scores to us, we'll take them into consideration, but if you do not share them with us, or if you have not taken the ACT or SAT, and many transfer students have not, you will not be penalized in any way. We will simply base our review of your application on the other materials in your file. I do want to spend a minute discussing an applicant's academic preparation. We want to admit students who will succeed academically. You know, we're not schools where we're trying to weed out students we admit to our schools, right? We want the students we admit to thrive. So we want to be sure that whomever we admit are academically well prepared. Many of our transfer students and student veterans do not have straight A all the time, but we do expect our strongest applicants to present strong recent academic credentials with grades mostly in the A range. Now, the trajectory shown on your transcript is important. The admissions committee looks for either consistently strong academic performance or a transcript that shows an upward trend in grades. It is not unusual for our successful applicants to have had softer grades earlier in their educational careers, maybe in their high school career, or maybe their earlier college record. But as I said earlier, we do expect the transcript to show strong recent performance. Analytical reading, writing, and quantitative skills are good foundations for liberal arts education. No matter what your intended major, it's helpful to have taken courses that focus on analytical reading and writing, such as English composition, history classes, as well as classes that focus on quantitative reasoning like math. Your other courses should mostly be in the liberal arts and sciences. Some of your colleges may call them, general education or gen ed courses. I recommend avoid taking criminal justice, communication, business classes, because we do not offer those on our campuses. Now, this does not mean that if you're currently studying business, for example, at your current college, that you should not apply, but I would encourage you to try to include some liberal arts or gen ed courses in your program. And if you have a choice to take classes in person or online, consider taking them in person. In-person classes usually are much richer than online classes. And the instructors often know you better from in-person classes and write more helpful letters of recommendation. But we understand that taking only in-person classes may not be possible for everybody, especially given COVID disruptions or military employments. So it is fine to take online classes if they are the only option for you. Admission to our colleges is highly selective, but I suggest that you consider applying if you have a strong recent academic record, wish to pursue a liberal arts education, and want to actively engage a campus community. Of course, you should also be sure to apply to colleges with a range of selectivity. If you apply only to colleges where you know for sure that you're going to be admitted, you may not be stretching yourself. And it's also not prudent to only apply to colleges that are the most selective ones in the country. Hopefully, I've been able to demystify the admissions process a little bit for you. Let me now hand the presentation over to my colleague Lexi from Amherst, who will share her thoughts on the essays and the letters of recommendation.
Thank you, Patricia. And once again, excited to see you all. The next couple slides are, if you are an applicant that you're thinking about fall 2023 transfer, probably things that are so deep into your mind right now. So I'm happy to provide a little bit of context as to why we require both writing, essays, and recommendations, and some tips about that. Alex Buston from Princeton is also going to share a lot more tips down the road about the submitting the application, when to start, and all of that. So if you haven't gotten out your pen and paper already to take a couple notes or typing, like, these are good places to do that. But following up on Patricia's holistic admission discussion, this is really sort of the meat and the potatoes, so to speak, of that piece. We want to put all these pieces together of an applicant. We're peeling back the layers here. And while transcripts are super important, we know that there's so much more to individuals and how you are going to show up on our campuses and contribute in so many ways beyond just looking at your course selections and the grades that you've received there. So adding your story is a vital part of this process. In terms of student writing, really the main things that most of us are going to be thinking about are personal statements and essays. And all of us here tonight will require some form of writing and some form of personal statement for that. What we're really looking for are pieces that are going to be reflective, that are going to be authentic to your particular journey. Really start to think about the influences and the experiences that have really shaped you. And what I would encourage you to do is to not think about what you think we want to hear. Often those pieces of writing are completely fine, but they read kind of generic to us, and they're leaving out sort of that heart of what your personal experience has been and what you have taken away from that and how you've grown and how you are hoping to continue to grow at our institutions. Because of course, the undergraduate experience is really all about that growth, exploration, trying to figure all of those things out, or at least understand the process of that. Some of us will have multiple essays. I represent Amherst College. We have multiple essays. Think about the various pieces of writing on our applications as a collective. By that, what I mean is know that in holistic admissions, we are reading every piece of your that you've submitted to us. So something I would suggest that you don't do is repeat to us the same story in multiple pieces of writing. Think about these essays as a collective, or any sort of short answers that we have on our thing as a collective, and understand that we are going to look for the dimensions of you. And the best way that we can really do that is if you are providing us slightly different insights into your experiences and who you are. So it's not a wrong thing per se to tell us a very similar thing in the first essay and then 2 other short answers, but in some ways you're doing yourself a little bit of a disservice because you're giving us a little bit less information. And we know that all of you are really multidimensional people with so many different experiences, identities, and things to share. Even if I know some of you are sitting there and thinking, oh man, I don't have much to share, you do. Over the years that all of us have worked together with these students, there are so many wonderful things that our transfer students bring to our communities, and we learn a lot about that in your own words through the writing. Also know that you're not going to be able to capture everything in an essay. I think that's the one thing that students really are like, oh, wow, I've got 500 words or whatever the word suggested limit is there. And know that really great writing is not going to be able to capture every little piece of your experience. That's okay. What you want to think about are sort of what are the really main takeaways? What are the heart of that? And be okay with the fact that, you know, the first essay that you're submitting, which is often a why are you transferring kind of essay, is not going to give every piece of information about that process. We get that as well. So we understand that as well. There are not right or wrong answers to essays, but really your truth and your experience is what we're looking for. In the why transfer essay, a quick tip that I have is that occasionally students might think, they might focus entirely on past experiences only, or entirely looking toward the future only. And I think some of those really great essays talk about the past, sort of the present of where you are, and maybe a little bit about the future too. So if you really had to think about that, you could kind of break it down into thirds. You want to start early and you want to edit these. They are going to be the type of writing that you'll want to put it down into writing. Sit with it for a little bit, let it sit for a few days, a week if you can, and go back. And there's going to be a sort of new light that you're going to be able to experience this with, and you might have some very important edits out there. If you can, I would suggest having 1 or 2 folks read your essays, someone who knows you well, maybe someone that also works with you at your institution, and some really good questions to ask them after they've completed reading your writing are, does this essay sound like me? And what were your impressions of me from this essay? And if the answers to those questions are, yes, this sounds like you, and whatever those impressions are the impressions that you were intending, you can often rest assured that you've done an excellent job completing your essays there. As I mentioned before, some of us have short answers. Some of that really speaks for itself, but do know that those are also important to us in the process in addition to the essays. Some of us also have analytical writing pieces. Those are often graded. I guess they don't necessarily have to be graded, but papers that you've submitted from some of your classes before. And what those do is that showcases a different type of writing than other pieces. So your essays are going to be quite personal, and that's going to be reflective of that. Analytical writing is going to be a little bit more formal. Often those are best pieces from humanities, social sciences, courses where you're putting together a full paper and having a thesis statement defending that, so we can see a lot of your critical reading and critical thinking and problem solving abilities is what I meant to say. I think I'll move on now in the interest of time to think about some of the recommendations as well. These are really important too. So in addition to your own writing and your own impressions and self-reflection, we also want to learn about others who know you really well, particularly in the academic context. This really helps us assess the qualities of your work. How do you show up in the classroom? We have a lot of students who apply to our institutions where the transcript itself suggests that the student could be able to do the work and be very successful students at our institutions. And so how do we then learn more about what kind of students you are? Are you a student who's a grade grubber? No, none of you are, of course, but are you a student who plays it safe? Or are you a student that maybe takes some intellectual risks from time to time, even if that means you're going to get a slightly lower grade on a paper? What kind of projects did you really excel at? How did you grow? How do you respond to feedback? How do you interact with your community members, with your classmates? Those are all things that a transcript cannot tell us, but recommendations can. And those are all very vital important parts of our process as well. The academic instructors, Patricia mentioned a little bit about this already, but they are often best submitted by professors or teachers who've taught you from sort of a full kind of credit academic course. Sometimes the classes that are 1 credit or a half credit, you're just not being able to do as much work in some of those classes. And that's why the credit hours are lower. So oftentimes we get the most information about your critical thinking, your problem solving ability from those classes that are 3 credits and higher, because you're doing some really significant work there. Think about topics or courses in the STEM, humanities, social sciences, foreign language. Advisors can be okay. Some of us do allow high school teachers, sometimes we don't. So there's a range of different pieces that and people that you could ask for that. But oftentimes some of your more recent academic work are going to be really great there because that's how you are right now as a student. And that's how you are going to show up on our campus. That doesn't necessarily mean somebody that you just started a spring course with, although that could be a person. But last fall, the semester before, those are usually sort of good assessments for us if you can. If you have a lot of choices, which oftentimes I feel like people feel like the opposite is true, but if you have a lot of choices in terms of your academic recommenders, I think you should ask some professors that you think might take the time to write you a recommendation. Some professors are really, really busy. So we want to know some personal details there if we can, but I also know that some of you might be in some larger classes, and we understand that as well. If you can, it's also helpful to have one recommendation from an academic professor that's in the general academic area, which you may be interested in majoring, which is to say you want to be a chemistry major at one of our institutions, a professor that's taught you in a lab science class might be a good reflection there. But most of us do not have hard and fast rules. So know that a lot of us have a lot of flexibility in terms of what we're accepting here. And if you have questions about that, you can certainly email any of us, and we will email you our individual emails as well. In terms of, there's other than the academic instructors, there's also other recommendations. These are often optional for us. These are folks that haven't taught you in an academic setting, an employer, a volunteer experience, an internship, could be your advisor if they haven't taught you as well. These are commonly submitted, especially by U.S. service members and veterans. So thinking about maybe your commanding officer, although it does not have to be that person at all. But do know that the majority of applicants, I think at some of our institutions, do not necessarily submit other recommendations. So do not feel like if you don't submit one, that you are not going to be able to be admitted, or that we're going to think that you haven't completed a full application. That is completely not the case for us. But if you do choose to use another recommendation, often one submission there is typical. I have lots of other tips. Happy to talk about some of them in the Q&A. I'm sure some of you are writing in questions right now about recommendations, but certainly do reach out to us. And I'm going to pass it along to my colleague.
Hey everyone, I'll take it from there. So lots of great tips about the application itself, and we'll continue this conversation when we get into the Q&A. We wanted to take just a little bit of time as well to talk about what the post-admission process looks like. So after decision letters come in and after you get some of those admit letters, what are the next steps from there before you have to decide what institution best fits you? So we'll spend a little time now just talking about financial aid and credit transferability specifically as part of that process. So as soon as you receive your decision letters from us, and if that decision letter is an admit, then you will receive with it your financial aid package, assuming that you've completed your financial aid components, the required elements of the financial aid application. And you'll receive some information about what credits are transferable to our institutions. So those come right away with your decision letter, so that you have plenty of time to really ask questions about those, get into the details with us, and again, make sure that everything is going to work out in a way that fits well for your needs and your preferences. With financial aid specifically, to just highlight what that package kind of might entail and might look like. First off, all of our institutions really center our priorities around making our colleges and their experiences there accessible to as many students as possible. And financial aid is critical to that. So we really offer some of the most generous financial aid packages in the country. We all offer need-based aid specifically. What that means is that you'll complete your financial aid applications, whatever is required for our specific institutions. And based off those financial aid applications and the financial information that you share with us, our financial aid offices will determine how much you and or your family can pay towards college. And that however much you can pay, then we'll see, well, how much beyond that do they need from us to cover the cost of our institution? So that however much you need beyond what you can pay, we all cover 100% of that. That is considered your demonstrated financial need. And that is what your package will entail. So what the details of that package will be within that document that you would receive with your decision letter. All of the fine details about it that are going to be really important to the conversations you have with us and to your considerations, again, of fit. We also have fee waivers available. So if, before you're even thinking about this step in the process, if you're just thinking about the application again here, and there's a cost to that application, and that's a barrier for you, might be a reason that you otherwise wouldn't apply, please don't let that stop you from applying. Reach out to our institutions, ask for a fee waiver. I can guarantee from all of these institutions here, you'll hear yes, and you'll hear yes from many institutions when you request a fee waiver and when you say that you need one. So really make sure that you take that extra step of reaching out or selecting a fee waiver within the application to make sure that doesn't stop you from applying to an institution that you're really excited about. And some of us have free transfer applications as well, so that may not be a step that you need to take. The financial aid, as I mentioned, the package will be provided with the offer of admission, and that's going to be a letter that's going to explain, again, all of the exact numbers of what you're going to be receiving, what's that connected to, how does that connect to the cost, and in a way that's hopefully pretty easy to understand, but almost everybody ends up having questions about them, and rightfully so. So again, we give that to you nice and early, so you have plenty of time to meet with us one-on-one or to attend sessions that we may be offering to really make sure that you thoroughly understand it and that you feel really good about what you're potentially saying yes to. Our financial aid programs also all consider the full cost of attendance. So when we're talking about all this need, cost, financial aid, what we're really talking about is all of that in regards to everything that comes with being a student at our institutions. So tuition, certainly, but also housing and food costs and living expenses, personal expenses, they might be called textbook costs, maybe travel back and forth to campus if you're calling another place home during the year. All of the many costs that come with attending an institution like ours. And often for many students, that means attending an institution away from home. So, we really consider the whole of that cost breakdown and address that through our financial aid programs. And you've kind of probably already noticed me saying this, and you've noticed others saying and how they're describing even how we read your essays, your letters of recommendation. But in so many ways, our process, both our admission process, our post-admission process, and really the experience of students on our campus once they're enrolled is very student-centered and very individualized. It's a benefit, I think, of many of our institutions that we really have the resources and the people power in place to be able to personalize the experience. And so we do our best to make ourselves really available, both in experience experiences like this, and you'll see emails from us where we offer opportunities to connect with us directly further. But again, beyond that, in this post-admission process as well, when you have questions, when you really want to make sure that you're understanding the information being presented to you, we'll be really available for you in that process to make sure you feel supported. When it comes to transfer of credit, the credit review, as I mentioned, is also provided with the letter of admission. And what that generally is going to be based off of is looking at your past credits, your past college credits, and looking at, are those courses that are similar to the types of courses that are offered at our institutions? So your kind of liberal arts and sciences courses, essentially. Really quick way to look at that is, if you're really interested in Yale and you want to get a sense of what does that exactly mean, just look up Yale's areas of study and kind of scan that list and see what in the courses that you've taken, somewhat aligns with that list, or Pomona's or Amherst or whatever it may be, any institution that you're interested in. That's a great way to kind of get a concrete sense of what exactly we mean by these liberal arts and sciences type courses. But that's kind of the general term that I'll use here. And if you have taken courses in very similar areas, then it is likely that they will be transferable, though there are some specific details beyond that that are going to be specific to each of our institutions. A big question in the last few years especially has been, are online classes transferable? The answer from all of our institution is that they could be. We will consider online coursework. We will look at it for transferability, partly with the lens of, are they in courses similar to the courses that we offer? But there are also other considerations that may be taken into account. It's a little bit specific to each of our institutions. Our policies differ slightly. So that question is best answered by going directly to colleges' individual websites and or reaching out to us directly with that question if you want to discuss it further. But again, just know that the answer is that we may consider those for transferability. And so they might be, if you're somebody who has taken all or some online courses during the pandemic or otherwise. So definitely reach out to us if you have more questions about that. But all just to say that we do our best to provide you with a good amount of information about what it is that you're signing up for, should you choose to attend our institutions, if you are offered admission, and to give you the support and the resources you need to kind of walk you through that process. So from there, I'll hand it over to the next colleague.
Thanks very much, Alex, and to all my colleagues. Once again, everyone, my name is Alex Buston, representing Princeton here today, and also I've been joined by my kitten Pebbles, who is also my trainee as my personal assistant, so she'll be helping out as we get through the next couple slides, which are really to help kind of create an action plan for all the information that you've heard tonight or whenever you're watching this. We've covered a lot of information about the academic essays, the recommendations, transfer credit, our holistic admission process. So what does that mean for you? What are some next steps that you can think about in the coming days, weeks, months, really depending on what your timeline is? And so I've got a couple slides here to cover those areas. And I think really first and foremost, just really want to stress the importance of not ruling out colleges that seem out of reach because they're too selective, they're too expensive, they're kind of elite admission rates or whatever. I think understanding that as we're prepared, as we're hopefully conveying today, there's a lot more that goes into it than just the numbers or the likelihood or whatever, especially the way that our processes are built, and especially when it comes to affordability. And we are, definitely all private institutions that have some of the most expensive sticker prices that you'll see out there, but also have some of the most generous financial aid programs as well, and therefore can be some of the most affordable options. So obviously asking about financial aid and also asking about application fee waivers. So most applications will require a fee of $70 or $80 per submission, but very often these can be waived for low income reasons or for students who are involved in the military. Usually that comes with an automatic fee waiver. So make sure to ask about those. But the importance of financial aid concurrently is to make sure that you are also applying for financial aid concurrently as well. As Alex was elaborating on earlier, we have some very powerful need-based financial aid programs that can absolutely make this one of your most affordable options based on the need-based grants that we're able to provide. But we can only do so if you're also submitting that financial aid application at the same time. So usually those deadlines are around the same time as the application deadline. Make sure that you're applying for those concurrently and filling out all the requirements so that you can receive those as well. If you're applying this year, that's an important question and distinction to make. If you feel like this is the year I'm transferring, and maybe that's why you're at this webinar, or maybe it'll be in a future year. But if you are thinking of applying this coming year for the upcoming deadlines, which we'll show shortly, then start setting up your account. Our applications are going to be due in February or March, and so it'll be helpful to familiarize yourself with what that application looks like. It might be a third-party platform like the Common Application or Coalition Application that many of us use, or it might be another application, one that's specifically designed by the college itself. So make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with that and not leaving everything to the last minute as far as learning what those essay questions are, and also what other materials are required. Even before you set up your application, even before you submit the application, you will find online checklists of required materials for each application and for each program. So kind of making a list of what those materials are. For college A, I need these recommendations. For college B or whatever. There will be a lot of overlap, but I think having a spreadsheet or a way of organizing so that you understand what the requirements are for the different programs you're looking for and how you're going to fulfill them, and also making a plan for the timeline on how you're going to do it. If the application deadline is February 15th or March 1st, your plan should probably be to request that material before February 14th or before February 28th to make sure that there's enough time for that to reach us and that your recommenders have enough time to write them, as was being said earlier. It's sometimes okay. This is something to check with the individual college, but sometimes these supporting materials that you have limited control over and how they're sent, they can arrive after the deadline as long as you get your application in. Different colleges have different levels of flexibility there as well. But obviously, if there's a processing delay due to your transcript or submission error by your recommender, that's not going to be held against you. We'll work with you to make sure that we get that in. But again, the sooner you put that plan in place to get those required and requested, the better, and the more likely we'll get all the information in time. Obviously, think about who those references are going to be. Are these individuals that have taught you? Those are usually a general requirement, but also for students who have had other experiences outside of academics, whether they're traditional students or non-traditional students or older students, military students that want to use those optional recommendations that Lexi was talking about. Start developing those relationships. If you're, even if you're not applying this year, think about who they might be as you encounter them in the coming months or years or whatever. Or if you are applying this year, you probably have a pretty good idea of who those folks are now. And so, as I said, make sure to get that request out for them as well. But then also make sure you're thinking about how you're going to convey your experiences and your story and your perspectives in the written parts of the application. Again, this was elaborated a little bit in the written components of the essay, but this is not a writing competition. It's not about who writes the best or who has the best flowery prose or whatever. This is really more about helping us understand your story to this date and the intersection with the application process and why you're a good fit for our institution. So the sooner you start thinking about crafting those essays in your head, how you're going to authentically put to paper how your experiences have manifested themselves and how you present yourself with the application. Again, the sooner you do that, the better. If you're creating your application account already, if you haven't already, you can certainly see those application questions posted, but you can also access them through our online websites and checklists and so forth as well. And if you haven't already, especially if you're applying this year, or even if you're applying in a future year, connect with supporting resources in your college or maybe beyond that as well. If you have a transfer resources or a veterans resources center or whatever at your college, definitely connecting with them can help you get aligned with the next steps and connecting with other students or other resources too. But some of them might also be outside of your college too, which I'll touch upon in just a minute. But these are things that you can really start to do, and you should probably start to do within the next week if you're applying this year, especially for creating the application profile. But even if you're not applying this year, you can start thinking about those college lists, those requirements, and how you're going to fulfill them. Some more information on the next slide, which I'll get into, which could be a little bit longer term. And I'll point out, as you see on the right side of your screen, the transfer deadlines that we have coming up for this year. These also are fairly common to repeat the same every year. So if you're not applying for fall 2023, but you're applying for fall 2024, these dates you can usually plan around. They don't change drastically from year to year. But when you get to the point of having done most of what I've talked about, and this is mostly for students who are applying this year, make sure, again, you're answering those application essay questions. You want to be telling us, what we want to know about you, which may be similar concepts that you want to convey similarly to different colleges, but the way you convey them and the way that we want to understand them at college X or college Y or college Z might also be different in terms of how you're incorporating the values of that college or how you're relating your particular fit to that individual college. When you're filling out the sections for extracurriculars or other clubs, don't limit your definition of what extracurricular activity means. For us, that can be those traditional clubs that you think of in your high school or your college or whatever. But extracurricular is also absolutely anything that you're doing outside of your academic curriculum. That might be clubs that you choose to be involved in, but it might also be your obligations, your full-time job, being a parent or your family or whatever. That all, whether it's an activity you plan to get involved in at college at the next level or not, if you're balancing that with a rigorous academic program, that does have value in the application, because it helps us understanding how you spend your time, as well as your time management to be able to manage those obligations, whether they're by choice or necessity, as well as a rigorous academic program, because you'll be doing something similar one way or the other with our academic programs as well. We also mentioned that once you are submitting your materials, updates and supporting materials, like I said, can be submitted after the application deadline. And do note that that can be done through those application platforms or separately through email, but also you can check your applicant portals as well. So usually when you submit an application, you will receive a portal where you can also upload additional material afterwards, but you usually can also email those to us as well. And this is more the optional section of the application, but it's something that a lot of transfer students, maybe not all, but a lot of transfer students tend to find pretty helpful, is using the optional sections of the application to explain their trajectory or unusual circumstances on the application. It might be, again, things that are relevant to your work, either concurrently or in the past. If you've had a very linear traditional trajectory, or maybe a wider and more meandering path with ups and downs or whatever, explaining those circumstances to us is helpful information, because that helps us understand not just what your transcript says about your past academic success, whether it was strong or not, but what other circumstances you were engaged with during that time and how you've pursued your academic success after those circumstances have been removed, or even while those circumstances are still present. And so using those additional information or those other details areas, or even just a CV or a resume to help us understand what your trajectory was and what you've been doing since high school, throughout, during, before, or after your college career, that's helpful information for us to know, not just what resources or circumstances rather have impacted your trajectory, but also what are those perspectives that you're bringing, that you're writing about in the written components of the application, those perspectives that, as my colleagues were saying, that we value in the essays, because we value what they are going to bring to our community as well. And then again, keep track of the application through the applicant portal. This is not just a way after you submit your application to track or rather to provide more information after the submission, but you could also track what else we've received. So it might be additional recommendations that are sent separately, transcripts and so forth. So make sure to keep track of that as well. On the next slide, I just quickly want to mention a couple of resources that I mentioned earlier. Some students who may be involved, like I said, in a college or a school that does have a good sport resources, definitely rely on those as well. But some of you may be doing college part-time or maybe not directly connected with a college, particularly for military students who are active duty or veteran students who maybe don't have that connection to a college one way or the other. There are several national nonprofit resources that can work with you and provide resources by veterans, for veterans and active duty students who have been through the process themselves and have worked with students like yourself. So for military students, particularly those involved in the Marine Corps, the Leadership Scholar Program is a great resource. They're very well connected with a lot of base education centers and some colleges nationwide. Service to School is a great nonprofit run by nationally, virtually for veterans, working with students who are looking to transition anywhere within or during higher education. And the Warrior Scholar Project, or WSP, is a similar nonprofit run by veterans for students who are either service members or veterans themselves, for academic workshops to add academic preparation over like summer boot camps, as they call them, for students to connect with, academic resources provided by our colleges, but also can network with other students like yourself and who have supported students like yourself. These are all 100% free for students as well. There's no cost to be involved with them at the nonprofit level. So just quickly wanted to mention that. And now we've kind of moved on to conclude the formal part of our presentation. And on the next slide, we'll dive into the Q&A. We've already mentioned, Adam already mentioned the Q&A tool, which many of you have been using assiduously this evening, which is great. We've had some great questions questions that we've been trying to answer there too. For those of you who are also registered, most of you I imagine have done so in advance. We've received several hundred advanced questions, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can, but obviously we'll not be able to do every single one of them. Just wanted to point out also the registration link here as well. Again, most of you are here having registered as well, and you are watching this through the link that you were provided. But if you're watching this separately and you didn't register and you want to do so, you can absolutely do so now, and this will connect you with all of our colleges to receive more information, including, as we said, the recording of this session with the production quality permitting on that, which will follow up afterwards, as well as some of the handouts that were provided earlier. And also reproducing here the transfer application deadlines that you saw earlier on the prior slide as well, just to have that for students who are applying for fall of 2023. But now I think we'll dive into the Q&A process here. And I'll just pitch some of the ones that were sent in advance, as well as some of the questions that have come up soon. And I just want to, maybe I'll start with you, Alex, on this one, just to go back to financial aid since we talked about it, really to hammer this home. A question that came through, I think, in advance and live was, to what extent does applying for financial aid, especially high amounts of financial aid, impact the chances of admission, and how is that treated in our processes?
Yeah, thanks for asking it. Yeah, I'll just emphasize a really quick answer. It doesn't. If you apply for financial aid, it does not in any way impact your application. Some of our institutions may have slightly different policies around need-aware kind of admission policies for international students. So if you're an international student, I would check each institution, but that is not to say it's held against you. It's just a consideration in a series of many considerations within the admission process. But for domestic applicants, we are all need-blind institutions, and whether or not you apply for financial aid is in no way a factor in your admission process. So if you do apply for financial aid, it is not held against you. It does not decrease your odds of admission. We absolutely encourage you to apply for financial aid if it's something that you need to be able to make our institutions accessible to you.
That's great. Lexi, I'm going to pose this one to you because I think you were speaking a little bit about this in the essays and the why transfer question. Can you talk a little bit about how a student should start and what their main approach should be in terms of why they want to transfer from where they are, and then maybe how they might incorporate that in with the more school-specific questions we ask about their fit for the institution to which they're applying?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I know the majority of you are likely transferring from two-year institutions. And so you're thinking, okay, why am I transferring? I'm transferring because that is the next logical step of my journey. And so one of our pieces of advice is to really make the essay questions work for you. Think a little bit beyond that, especially if you are a student at a two-year institution. Think about what it is that you're hoping to get out of the experience. What I will say about any of us who happen to ask questions that are specific to, like, why would you want to transfer to Princeton specifically or Amherst? Some of us have those, some of us don't. Don't necessarily feel like you need to go to the website, pull off 3 faculty bios and say, I can't wait to take a class with this specific professor. I think you want to also make sure that we're learning something about you, other than the fact that you might have some great research skills on our websites, which are great places to go to. So I think you might want to think about thematically, what are some of the things and experiences that you're thinking about? And I'm not trying to list these in any particular order, but small class sizes, tighter communities. Many of us are very residential focused, although for all of us, that's not necessarily a huge part of the program. It really does depend, but what are those broad-based pieces of it that you are looking to engage with that might be different than your experience right now, right? So at a two-year institution, going to one of our institutions, that residential community is not there at most two-year institutions. It is at some, but not others, right? That's a big difference. So don't necessarily say, well, I'm finishing my associate's degree, so I got to transfer next. Think about, what have you learned at your institution right now that has really been an integral part of your experience that you hope to continue at a four-year institution? Maybe also, what are some of the things that are at your current institution that are not reflected in your next piece of your journey, and the things that you're looking forward to experiencing for the first time? that is going to be completely individual to you, right? There's not a right or wrong answer to that, but that's how you can sort of make that question a little bit more personalized. And that's exactly what we're looking for, is that personal reflection for you, and not necessarily sort of the nuts and bolts of the question of, oh, I'm transferring because I'm graduating. So I hope that helps. Any other questions that we're asking? Often they are quite broad-based. That is intentional so that a student can access a question from many different facets, because we know that all of you have very different experiences, stories, lived experiences. Educational trajectories are amazing to read about in our transfer pools, because so many of you have so many different ways that you've ended up where you are right now, right? So if you're reading a question and you're thinking, oh my gosh, like, what are they hoping to get out of this? Always default to, I'm trying to learn, you know, Lexi heard at Amherst, right? Or Alex at Williams or Princeton, you know, they're trying to learn something personal about you. So don't get too wrapped up in thinking like, am I not answering this the exact right way? If you're telling something about your experiences, you definitely are. So hope that helps.
Definitely well said, and being introspective and reflective on those is absolutely important, as you said. Adam, I'll throw this one to you, specific to academics, and a question that was asked about how we view W's or withdrawal on courses or academic renewal courses on transcripts, and how that factors into the process as a part of the whole academic trajectory.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, you know, one of the things that I think we're all looking for, and Patricia talked about this so well, we're looking for students who are academically ready and academically prepared to succeed at our institutions. And so we're looking at your courses and we're looking at your grades. For those students, for the most part, that's going to mean letter grades in core academic classes like math, science, foreign language, social studies, and English. For those courses where you have a W via which for those who don't know is a withdrawal, or for those who are making academic sort of makeup coursework that's being added to their transcript, those in general are things that we are very interested in part because we want to understand the rationale for the W or for the withdrawal, or the reason for the academic makeup work. So for students who have, for example, failed a course, and they are taking the course again in order to make up the work, that is usually pretty clearly defined on the transcript. And we can see that because it's articulated by the transferring community college. For W's, sometimes there's not always an explanation. And I think it is in your best interest to let us know what that is. And so, for example, last year, I read a military veteran who had a series of withdrawals because toward the end of the second semester, he was deployed and he had to leave campus. He had to leave the United States and he was gone for 3 months on a deployment. And so the W's were made up later, but they were explained because that veteran applicant took time in the additional information to explain why the W's were there. That's exactly what we're asking for, is additional context. Where the W's are not explained or where the work is not made up, that's where you're introducing the questions and the conversation in committee. And that's really, as an applicant, where you don't want to be. When in doubt, please let us know the context for the W or for the makeup work. And that's probably the best advice I can offer.
I think that's a really good point to end on too. I think we talked to a lot of students who may have had encountered those ups and downs or whatever, and whether it's a mindset that they personally share, or sometimes this is part of the military where they feel, you know, explaining those circumstances means they're creating excuses or making excuses that they should, as opposed to owning their mistakes. And really want to reiterate, that's not the way we see it. These are not kind of making excuses. This is providing us with a really important context about circumstances that may have been working against you and how you thrived after or in spite of those circumstances. So really want to hammer that home. Two things I just want to quickly address, because I know it's come up a couple of times. A lot of you asking about interviews in these processes, and I can say that these are not too commonly offered in very high applicant pool processes, just because it's impossible to fairly interview all candidates, let alone all competitive candidates, let alone all candidates or whatever. There are some processes at our level that do offer interviews, but even in cases where they are offered, they're usually not required, and they're absolutely not determinative for admission for the most part. There, the information that we get from your written components as well as the recommenders and those who are advocating for you, that is really the lion's share of you presenting yourself and us understanding your background and your fit for the university as well. So Patricia, let me throw this one to you because you were giving us some really good kind of examples of typical students who have thrived in different circumstances that we were talking about earlier. Can you expand a little bit more and talk about those students who clearly thrived at Yale, and we all have similar students at our campuses? What do the resources look like, or what does the support look like for students who are coming from either transferring from community college as a traditional student from a different setting, or even a non-traditional student where there might be more roadblocks or more adjustments to make? What kind of resources are available at colleges like ours?
Sure, absolutely. The beauty of our 5 colleges is that we are very well resourced institutions. So the resources that we provide our students are mind-boggling. So just a few examples. All of our institutions will have kind of writing tutors, math tutors, science tutors, and they're all free, and students can sign up to use them. And I would say that whether you're entering as a transfer student or a non-traditional student or a first-year student, I would say that our institutions, really the students who actually do best academically are the students who take advantage of our tutoring, our writing workshops, etc. It's not necessarily just seeking sort of assistance because you're struggling. It is simply helpful for any student to go, I'm writing a paper, let me sort of use the resources of the Writing Center. And that is true whether you're coming in as a transfer student or not. We all have orientation programs that are specifically for transfer students to help you ease into the perhaps more rigorous and more fast-paced sort of academics, and to learn about what we offer. I think what happens at our institutions, probably when you come to places like Yale, as a student, you might only be able to really access 0.1% of the resources that we offer. So don't be shy about taking advantage of those. There are people who advise you on abroad opportunities. You will have advisors who will meet with you every semester. You will have instructors in the departments that you're majoring in who serve as advisors. There are students who will be applying for international fellowships, and there are people in our colleges that advise you on that. There are career service offices where we will help students with internships, job opportunities, etc. So there are many, many resources at all of our institutions.
That's a really important point to hammer home, as you said, and it came about when we talked about financial aid, about how well resourced our institutions are, but also really what that means for just how low the ratio is of kind of administrators and resources to the individual, or I should say how many resources per student there actually tends to be. And that's part of the reason our institutions, our programs, transfer and otherwise, are so small. It's not just because we want to reject a lot of students and not bring students to our campus, but that is a byproduct of the fact that we are very intentional in having a very high amount of resource per student ratio that allows to provide those kinds of resources that are available for all students, but also the ones that are intentionally designed for particular types of underrepresented students, whether that means, first-generation students, low-income students, but also transfer students or military students as well. So really important to hammer that home, as Patricia was saying, for what we offer at our programs. Another question that came up, I'll just quickly address this here, just about sending transcripts and supporting materials. There are ways to do this. I kind of glossed over this. If you're using an application platform like Common App or Coalition App, there are ways to organize it through the application where you can notify, enter their name and notify them through the application platform, and they can upload it through the platform, and that platform sends it to us. But you could also send the information to us directly, as long as it comes directly from the individual institution. So if the transcript, it doesn't have to be sent through Common App. It can come directly to us from your transfer counselor, from your school, from the recommender as well. As long as it's not coming from the individual student, they can send them by email or hard copy mail or whatever is the easiest way to manage that as well. So, and if you're not sure, please do reach out to us. We have officers and members of our staff open at many times to assist you and check on materials and advise you on how to send them. And again, it's okay if it happens after the deadline for the most part. I think this is something I'll open up to anyone to kind of jump in, and it came up a few times, and it may be related to some things that we've addressed. But what are some of the misconceptions that we've noticed transfer students doing it in the past, and maybe what are good ways to get around them? And I'll start with one that I addressed earlier, is that I think a lot of students, transfer or otherwise, particularly transfer students, just don't apply because they maybe self-select out, thinking that our institutions are too selective, they're not affordable, whatever. And I encourage you not to do that and not draw that conclusion based on anecdotal information. Get the information from that individual institution about what is available, what does it really look like, and are you competitive regardless of maybe your past academic success and more recent success, or maybe your financial resources may not be as much of an impact as you would think because of the financial aid we're aware of. So I think kind of not considering highly selective options that they're competitive for and having a range of those, I think, is a common mistake that students maybe don't realize until after the fact. So we're glad that you all are here joining us live tonight, or even maybe listening to this separately and are getting this information. So continue the conversation and help us convey everything to you as well. But I'll pass off to my colleagues. Any other misconceptions you've heard or advice you would give based on navigating those?
I just jump in and say, I think one of the misconceptions is that we're looking for one type or one specific kind of student. And I would say that's just not true, as all of us admit for our undergraduate first year student populations, we're looking for lots of different students with lots of different kinds of lived experiences. And that is true as well for our transfer student population. So if you are a first generation student, if you're DACA or UNDOC, if you're a foster youth, if you're a first generation student, if you're a student who is changed their mind about what they want to major in, and you're at a community college and you think we could help you with that transition academically, there's so many different ways to stand out in our applicant pool. We're not looking for one kind of student. We're looking for students who are aware of who they are and communicate those values, like we talked about in the beginning, in their application. That's what the committee responds to.
Yeah, and I'll add too, and there were a bunch of questions in the Q&A box about what activities should I participate in. And I think a lot of times maybe transfer students and non-traditional students are still thinking in the mindset of applying as a first-year student. You're in high school and I need to, participate in this sport or this community service or this club. I think it's a little bit different for older students, right? I mean, if you are a veteran, if you are a non-traditional student, we're not expecting you to be participating in clubs, et cetera. You might have a family. And sort of, and there are certainly community colleges where there are various activities that you can participate in, but it's not at the same level usually as in high school. So don't think so much as in kind of checking the box, in order to apply, I need to pursue this activity or this activity or this activity. I think I think it is sort of most important for transfer students and non-traditional students to focus on making sure that you're taking the right types of classes, doing well academically. And then beyond that, think about how you can sort of engage outside of the classroom. It could be that you're working full time. It could be that you are sort of very active in your community college through activities. It could be that you have sort of other interests that aren't sort of organized clubs or activities, and that's okay. So don't sort of get too hung up about that if you are a transfer applicant or a non-traditional student.
I'll maybe just, sorry, Lexi, did I? I'll maybe just quickly add one other piece of this kind of umbrella theme, which is, another common misconception that we hear from students is I did really poorly in high school, or I did really poorly in a previous college enrollment. I was enrolled in college 10 years ago and I didn't do so well. Does that make me a not competitive applicant in your process? And the answer is no. Please don't stop yourself from applying to institutions like ours or our specific institutions because of previous struggles in academic experiences. That's absolutely okay. That's common, I would even say. I would bet that many of our transfer students on our campuses at all of our institutions would fall under that description. Would say that they had some moment in their academic journey that was not so pretty, and now they're enrolled at our schools and doing great. So what we're really most interested in is your recent academic performance. How have you done in the last roughly 1 to 3 years of college enrollment, and really looking at being able to see evidence of academic success in that experience. And if you have had success in that most recent experience, then please consider our institutions and whether or not they might be a good option for you. But as my colleagues are all, I think, kind of, trying to send out in some way or another, these individual facets of this conversation are important. But the general message here is don't count yourself out before the journey is even started. Definitely make sure to keep this door open and to know that there might be a spot for you on one of our campuses.
I just want to echo what everyone else has said already, and to say that I think that students often do get caught up in thinking, here's this one thing that I have, or I'm a community college student, or I'm not I transfer from this institution, or I'm an international student or a domestic student. So you sometimes are putting yourself in this box and thinking this is going to be the thing that, is defining me. And really, we are really practicing fully holistic admission. And I want you to know that from our process, we are not putting you into those kinds of boxes when we evaluate, because one of the most rewarding things about all of our experiences of working at our institutions is that we know that there are so many intersections of experiences, identities, pathways, all of those things. And so I encourage you not to think, okay, I have to do this process or this process based on these things. That is true occasionally based on maybe a form you might submit for financial aid or something like that. But from the admission standpoint, there's not one thing that we're using to drive our decisions, right? There's not one class that we're looking at on your transcript that's having us make a decision this way or this way. There are really, truly many, many, many infinite pathways. And I know we've already said this, but I just want to reiterate it, to our institutions that are just going to be specific to you. I also just want to say that some of you are thinking, well, I don't have, these 3 amazing things to tell you all. I want you to know that you're all amazing in your own way. And we have so many students that come to our campus that just also feel like, I'm just a regular person, we are too, right? That's what this whole process is about. It's about, knowing the unknown, jumping into that. That's okay. I'm rambling, but there's not an exact science to all of this. It's good that you're a little bit nervous about it. And that means you're thinking really deeply about how you put this all together, but trust your instincts with a lot of this too.
Thank you, Lexi. Great advice. And I think a good place to wrap up, as we are just a bit past our promised 75 minutes or so as we began with Adam. So I want to thank you all again for joining us live, or for those watching the recording and maybe have found this information to be helpful. We know we didn't get to every single question. As I mentioned, we had several hundred that were submitted in advance, and another hundreds more tonight that we did try to answer live through the Q&A box, and also verbally too. So we hope it's some continued information. And again, please do stay in touch with our resources that we have on our websites, and our officers who are happy to assist you with future questions down the road. We will be following up with more information if you register using the link provided here on the screen to receive that information, as well as a recording of this session and the handout that was passed out earlier. So thank you all again for joining us. We hope it was helpful, and we hope that sometime we will hear from you again soon. So thanks again for joining us. Stay well and stay safe. Good night, everyone.